All right, everybody. Welcome to Along the Watchtower. This is a podcast that will talk about everything, which we're definitely expanding this year. It is January 1st, 2021. Today is Friday. I hope your new year was great. I hope it was fantastic. I hope it was everything that you could hope for and more. I also hope you didn't get arrested or black out or. I hope you survived it above all else. Um, we've had a few developments. Trump's override got overridden. We knew that was coming. There's been more AEIFs, adverse expressions after, I think, immunization. Oh, I'm sorry, adverse expressions from immunizations is what that means, I believe. I might be a little wrong on that. I'm always a little wrong on something. I'm not perfect. My telepathy has not kicked in yet. The noetic sciences will, however, support every claim, every thought, every fantasy I've ever had. I just gotta wait. No, but seriously, I do hope that it was okay. I hope you survived it. And I don't know. I hope you hit the goalpost for last year. I hope you hit it for this year. Um, I'm feeling good. I need the stimulus ball to roll around, waiting on my stimulus. Obviously will probably dedicate a good portion of it to making this show better. In the meantime, we had hashtag Force the Vote on the 30th that had people like AOC, Jimmy Dore, Kyle Kolzinski, Crystal Ball, stuff like that. We still haven't seen any movement on the House towards it. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and people do want and are clamoring for that vaccine, despite the fact that we are seeing increased numbers now of AEIFs and adverse effects. Expressions, really? Because I've been saying symptomatic expressions. Adverse effects from immunization, AEFIs, are what the WHO designate anaphylactic reactions, and that ranges from, I believe, the moderate to the severe, right? Those that require, epinephrine and, brief hospitalization and then some. So we will see about those developments, and actually this week alone there's been 5. So it's needless for me to say that there needed to be further study. We needed to know more information before we put forth these 2 vaccines. And there were 5 companies in the running that were part of Operation Warp Speed. And I do wonder what happened to those other companies. Perhaps they are being more stringent about their data and their oversight. Perhaps they're including teenagers, unlike the Pfizer vaccine, which included it late into its study. So we will only know about the effect that it has right around the time of spring, in a long-term sense, on teenagers, when it's supposed to go to the public. At large, that is, because we're seeing these reactions mainly from like doctors and wealthy people, because wealthy people go to the head of the line, because this has been a class war for a long time. But otherwise, again, I am hopeful. I'm feeling good. I'm glad to be cognitive and to be aware. Just to the minute extent, because I'm aware. No, it's like no one really is truly awake. And it takes a lifetime to even begin to open your eyes. And then that I think that sort of humility is why I engage in this sort of work and this sort of activity with a smile on my face. And it's a labor of love, because there's so much information out there, and so much of it being propagated is being told and expressed with a skewed narrative or point of view. And the whole idea is to cater to you emotionally, psychologically. They press the right, deeply rooted psychological triggers to elicit fear, to elicit interest, to elicit desire. This is how advertisers exist. This is why they exist. Edward Bernays, who was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, created the modern day advertising concept and was able to mix psychology with the commercial market. And that's how we have ads today, and that's how they're able to know particular words to say, how to cue particular music, the particular images and audio that you take in elicit subconscious reactions that you aren't even aware of, let alone the conscious choices and reactions that you have. So, it, and by it I mean news, is very much designed, and that's why, I was going through my day, and we're going to get started on the business, for our viewers. For our listeners. I keep doing that every single day, man. For our listeners, we're looking at a picture, and it's of a really, really hulking, ripped dog. Yeah, it's a the dog is bipedal status. It's sitting up on its two legs. Not even sitting up. It's a anthropomorphized like dog. It's a human-esque dog. And it says, journalists then always question what the government and big corporations are telling you. And he's got a pen and pad, and he's got his little newsboy fedora hat, And then it says, journalists now, and it's the same dog, no longer standing on two legs, bipedal, man-like, but docile and on its ass with a Starbucks frap and a Apple MacBook Pro. You can see where this is going. And he's got a really, really plum-colored wig and glasses on. It says, never question what the government and big corporations are telling you. And that really kind of encapsulates what I'm all of 33. However, the Panama Papers, the Afghanistan Papers, the Washington Papers, the Woodward and Bernstein breaking, the break-in, right? The DNC break-in under Nixon, getting Nixon fired. That whole era, the Vietnam era, really encapsulated I don't want to use the term American spirit, but what is kind of colloquialized as the American spirit in this sort of almost arrogant, juvenile, yet altruistic pursuit of the truth, quote unquote, the truth. And it led to devastating revelations of what our government was doing, not only behind our back, but in front of our faces, and obscuring with lies, because during that time, media was very much consolidated, I believe, to three companies, CBS, ABC, NBC, and forgot who owned. So News Corp owns, or Time Warner owns, News Corp, I believe, owns NBC. ABC is now owned by Disney, but back then, the American Broadcasting Corporation, I'm not sure who it was owned by. And it was three separate companies, and CBS was owned by Viacom. And was Viacom back? But anyway, I digress. The point is, however, is that it was consolidated. However, print was still very much, especially amongst localities, very much alive. But that was the advent of its death, because by that time you were starting to see satellite televised, live satellite television, where journalists could communicate to you 24 hours a day. In my archival channel, I should say, the Chronaxial Archives, I have footage from like the Kennedy assassination, King's assassination, and it's just a roll-on, and that was the beginning of that. And back then, journalists had integrity, they had curiosity, they had backbone, and now what we're seeing is like this gross disenfranchisement of what's supposed to be the pillar of our society by which we can hold our government accountable. There is no other medium in terms of information. They are the ones that have access. They are supposed to be told, and then they're supposed to question what they're being told. Furthermore, they're supposed to press for answers, right? And really all it's become about is clicks and ad revenue and just trying to generate interest however you can, even if that means to skew a narrative or to outright lie. And I thought that was cool. To begin on the tech tip, this e-bike, Mashable, always Mashable, it was totally 3D printed. It's called the Super Strata, and it could help you tame all terrains. I sound like an ad for it. Oh, that's really loud, sorry. But take a ride on this 3D printed bike for our listeners. It's called the Super Strata Ion. The bike comes with ride assist. It's going really slow and up to 20 miles per hour. I wonder where the motor is because it's really just a sleek frame. Each bike is custom made to your height, weight, and preferences and is made of a light and durable carbon fiber composite. Nice. The battery is kept inside the bike's tubing. That's the only place it can be kept. Wow, super thin battery, making for a more sleek and aerodynamic ride. Always that word, sleek. With a full unibody frame. Oh, yes, yes. The Super Strata can help you tame all terrains. It's just repeating. Very little tech news today, mainly because that's just the way it is today. But I do love biking, so I am excited about this. I really would like to get my hands on a 3D printer. My imagination runs wild because honestly, I would want to print a firearm. But we saw Ghost, which is a company that was 3D printing like frames, I believe. We saw them, although that was legal, get raided. So I'm gonna pass on that idea for now. But perhaps teaming up with somebody to like, I don't know, work out a schematic for a mech model. That'd be interesting. Anyway, the nerd in me was beginning. But Illinois, HuffPost says, Illinois expunges nearly 500,000 cannabis arrest records. Now, we saw with the 2020 election a vast sweep of progressive drug-related initiatives and policies take the forefront and win. There have been poll after poll after poll taken really for the last decade or a little over more since like a little behind the Obama administration regarding marijuana and the changing sentiment. And we went from a nation of like reefer madness to now really everyone seeing the benefits, old and young alike, regarding marijuana as far as, dealing with arthritis, dealing with cancer patients, dealing with those who have consistent nausea or any sort of muscle issue, a muscle related issue. It doesn't help mental health though. Actually can increase paranoia, and for those who are schizoaffective, definitely can irritate any sort of like delusional, symptoms that you may express regarding that. But it's just the same as psychedelics. Each has their application and must be used, as professionally and as intelligently as possible. I myself smoke marijuana for a multitude of issues. Instead of taking an anticonvulsant, this CBD actually works as an anticonvulsant as well, so I don't have seizures. Something I developed from my alcoholism. And it also helps I have a stomach issue related to other poor choices made in my life, and so it helps there as well. But outside of the inflammation that I can get from my 2 hip replacements, so there's a multitude of applications for me. However, as far as marijuana arrest records go, if it's anything like New York, a good portion of these are probably going to be non-violent first-time offenders. So we always want to see those. We always want to see those first and foremost get any sort of reform that occurs. So it's good to see. But the HuffPost reads, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker closed out 2020 by expunging nearly 500,000 non-felony cannabis-related records, and actually mandated by Illinois marijuana legislation law that went into effect a year ago. As part of the action, the governor also pardoned 9,219 low-level cannabis conviction records, part of the state's efforts to repair the damage inflicted by the war on drugs, primarily on residents of color. Because obviously, if the war on drugs is ravaging inner city neighborhoods with residents of color, you gotta police where the drugs are. But as we know, policing is militarized and has been heavy-handed. It did start in the 70s with the war on drugs and was exacerbated tenfold with the war on terror. Because the war on drugs has been around a lot longer than the war on drugs has been around a lot longer than the war on terror. And between the war on drugs internationally and things like Iran-Contra, and just outright the effects that those new types of drugs that the war on drugs was kind of helping to bring in, ergo crack, Well, they brought in the cocaine. The cocaine was then given to somebody. It doesn't matter. We can talk about Free Ray, Ricky Ross, and Gary Webb and the Iran-Contra affair another time. But the point is that the devastation was wrought most within urban neighborhoods, inner city neighborhoods with black people in them, black and Spanish people in them. To continue, we will never be able to fully remedy the depth of the damage in communities of color who've disproportionately shouldered this burden, he said Thursday in a statement. But we can govern with the courage to admit the mistakes of our past and the decency to set a better path forward. That's the best way forward. That's the mature way forward. Because if you continue to try and do this dance as if there's like a line that you can hit with law, legislation, with money. That's the whole thing about me and reparations. It's like you're putting a price tag on someone's on a human freedom, on the human ability to conduct themselves as they see fit. Really, you're putting a price tag on humanity, and there's no way to do that. There should be no way to do that. That isn't to say that I'm not for wide sweeping legislative change on multiple levels regarding, inner city neighborhood in particular, because I keep saying inner city neighborhoods because it's not just about black people at this point, right? You have the same economic constraints that are holding down black and minority people with other ethnic groups, right? A lot of it being immigrants that have moved here, immigrants and Spanish people, really. But at this point, like trying to suggest that we should single out black people. But what about the Chinese railroad workers? What about the disenfranchised Irish that came here? The attitude, the manifest destiny, American hegemonic attitude is one of overt aggression, both inward and outwardly. It's a constant challenge, a constant tension that is created in order to, manifest the best, I guess. And it's like that's wholesale psychotic and dysfunctional. However, given the results that it's had, what it ended up rotting was something that was taken advantage of. That's the thing I feel like a lot of people misunderstand. That when people, well, this nation was never great. It's like the foundation, the creation, the ideas of this nation were great, but the execution was hijacked like anything else, like most institutions around the planet. But I digress. Illinois' Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, which legalized cannabis in the state, required the government to expunge 47,000 cannabis-related arrest records between 2013 and 2019 by January 1st, 2021. In a unique twist, the law also created a program that reinvests 25% of cannabis tax revenue into a fund for youth development, anti-violence programs, reentry programs, economic development, and civil legal aid services for R3 communities, those dealing with high rates of gun violence, child poverty, and incarceration rates. Now, all it has to do is be correctly oversought, and you'd be great. With Thursday's action, the state also met a separate January 2025 deadline to expunge all 492,192 state-level records. However, only 9 of the state's 201 counties have finished clearing their own non-felony cannabis-related arrest records. In a statement to the Chicago Sun-Times, Senator Majority Leader Kimberly Lightford said the expungements are encouraging yet ultimately incremental. Because it really is just a start, but you have to start somewhere. Unfortunately, these folks here, it's never going to be good enough. And what I mean by that is they clearly lied about their initial reporting. Okay, and for listeners, what I'm looking at is so 2 officers identified in death of black man as lawyer blasts cover-up. Manuel Ellis in Tacoma in March. I vaguely remember this. It's a George Floyd-like situation where they basically not choked him out, but put him in a position. They hogtied him and put a face mask on him while he was claiming he couldn't breathe. Now, apparently the toxicology reported that he had amphetamines in his system. Initially, they said that he was in a high excited. They said he was in an excited state, whatever. And so, putting all my cards, not all my cards, putting all of the cards on the table. But they hogtied this dude. They didn't tase him. They didn't go through the things that you would think. And I'm not a cop. All right, I'm not a cop, and you know what I mean. I hate to put anything on anybody in that position. First of all, you signed up to be a cop, so let's start there. You're supposed to receive training that's both in preparation of a situation, any situation, not really any, but as many situations you can consider in that particular geographic and demographic, right, that may occur to you in a violent manner, right, if you were accosted violently. So this guy, he went and banged on the door, and I guess they came out of the car. Well, I'll read to you what happened, but I guess they came out, right, contributing factors included methamphetamine intoxication and dilated cardiomyopathy. This is the guy they said that had a heart that was really big and he was high on meth. I remember this, yes. And so that said, there's video. They came out with video. I don't remember seeing this video back then, but for our listeners, unfortunately, you won't see the video. But there's a video here. This woman in her car, and the cop just jumps on the dude. The dude's on the ground, and the two cops are standing above him. So at some point, despite the dude knocking on the door, obviously, bro, man got put down. But then the cop jumps on the dude and just starts wailing on him. Bam, 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 bam. And then the next video is the two cops on the dude, and they got the dude. They got Manuel Ellis, hogtied. I can't really see the hog tying, but they have him restrained. At the very least, his hands are behind his back. He's got a knee in his back from one cop, and the other cop's got a knee, what looks to be either on his neck or on his face. The audio, they were telling him to calm down, calm down, calm down. And yeah, we'll read on. But as I've already read ahead, spoiler alert, they put a mask on him, and the mask assists in the asphyxiation. But he was already complaining that he was having trouble breathing when they had already had him restrained. So, CBS News says at least 2 law enforcement officers have been identified as having participated. And here's the thing, again, spoiler fucking alert, dude got desk duty. They never face criminal charges. It's always, here's the thing, it's never a question of whether or not they followed departmental procedure. The department acknowledges that this officer didn't follow departmental procedure. Like, that's not in question, bro. If that was in question, we wouldn't be talking about it. But the whole fact is that this guy's dead. People are, when things go wrong during an arrest, that's like, oh, somebody got hurt, dude got knocked out. Not dude died. If every time something goes wrong in an arrest, somebody dies and that's justified, we're gonna see again, I keep calling it the Orwellian present. Right? This idea between a mass surveillance society, and it goes 2 times for inner city. Any massive, tightly knit, mostly Black and Spanish and foreigner community is always going to be the worst off. They're always going to be in the government housing. If those of us who are in that position, that is. You know what I mean? Because, again, it really is a demographic. Anyone who is in government housing, who has a low income, low education, they're always going to be the most vulnerable of any society. There's a large population of Black and brown people who are in that demographic, that cross demographic. That being said, you look at Chicago, and it also happens to be that these cities are not contingent, but are congregations of this demographic. Folks flock to the city when they don't have much, which is strange because 100 years ago there was more self-sufficiency, and if you didn't have much, you'd go and use your hands and live off the land. I mean, you mainly tried to live off the land anyway. Anyway, I digress. Let's read here. So, So they always give these people desk duty. They always excuse it. You know what I mean? And the whole thing is how fucking long it takes for any information. Like, we thought waiting day in and day out for domestic terrorist information was painstaking and annoying. This happened back in March. The shit with Anjanette fucking Young happened back in fucking June. Like, this is months and months and months ago. And of course, news about this or any sort of movement about it's happening while the flag of the pandemic is overshadowing, the narrative of the pandemic is overshadowing fucking everything. But at least 2 law enforcement officers have been identified as having participated in restraining Manuel Ellis, a black man who died after his airways were restricted in March. The new records were released by the Washington State Patrol on Wednesday. They identified an off-duty sheriff's sergeant who helped shove Ellis's leg to hogtie him while he was handcuffed and prone on the ground, and a 5th Tacoma police officer who placed a spit guard over Ellis's head after he had complained that he could not breathe. Officers Matthew Collins, Christopher Burbank, Macy Ford, Timothy Rankine were placed on leave as the investigation into Ellis's death continues. The Washington State Patrol named the newly identified officers as Pierce County Sheriff's Office Detective Sergeant Gary Sanders and Tacoma Police Officer Armando Farina. Neither has faced suspension. Both officers have been classified as witnesses and not as targets of the investigation. So not all the cops involved were white guys. Looks like there's an Arab dude and a Spanish dude. I mean, you know, if race matters for the victim, race matters for the perpetrator as well. Right? This isn't a system. This is what I'm saying. Like, this is an institutional thing, right? You go into the police officer, not brigade. You go into the ranks of law enforcement, and you are no longer like a black dude. Like, you're a cop. You're a cop first, above all else. Just as you know, folks talk about, like, I'm a black man, blah, 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 first, I'm an Arab first, I'm this and that first. Like, they identify with the things that they choose to be first, rather than the thing that they are inherently, if that makes any sense. And it's the same thing with the military. The military strips you of your individuality, right? And you become a part of this institutional jackbooted system that goes around, exerting force at the will of, political garbage, political trash, political dumpster fires. But Washington, let me see. The family's lawyer, James Bible, told CBS affiliate Cairo TV that the family was unaware additional officers were involved until. See, this is what I mean. The length of time in which that's something that I've only seen in regards to like government conspiracies, like cover-ups, and it seems like all of these are all the same level of cover-up that requires months and months of probing. It would be great to see like a massive national level class action lawsuit against each like county department that had across like the last 5 years. That's what I feel like BLM should campaign for. A massive national level class action lawsuit against each and every county that has committed transgressions against, black and minority people involving law enforcement. Okay, or rather those involving law enforcement in which the investigations were bungled. We got to get specific here. We want to get specific, and then we'll you increase the net because I feel like once anyone starts to see, we start to paint a picture when every single day you're looking at it. There's a new report from a new incident from another state, or in the case of Ohio, we read like 3 stories back to back, 3 different instances in the last. So you feel me? Like once you start to see the volume. How can you, as an attorney, not want to be chomping at the bit for that, and as an activist, not see the political opportunity that presents when you can? Because again, the whole idea, I always defer back to Dr. King. He understood that politics had to be the involvement in politics, the execution of effective politicking, had to be executed in order for the movement to grow and move the needle. The whole idea was moving the needle, not for now, but for later. Not for them, but for everyone that came afterward. And that really required a shift in the zeitgeist, a shift in the mental paradigm. Okay, that means you had to play the game to some extent. He didn't cater to politicians. He didn't pander. He didn't prevaricate. But he understood that optics were very important, and that if they were seen acting violently, regardless if it was provoked or not, regardless of if they're acting in defense, then they would be seen as monsters. They would be seen as the provocateurs, and anything that they were actually saying and communicating, because communication has to be first. Once you eliminate those, what do we always say? Communicate, because if you eliminate that, all you have is expatriation, right? Elimination, or incarceration, right? So he trying to communicate was first because they already did all the other things. They'd hose you down, they'd fucking beat you down, they'd arrest you repeatedly, and then a lot of times they fucking kill your ass. So all those things were already being executed. Communication was actually, it's supposed to be first, was the last resort left. You feel me? Right? In knowing that, the optics were everything, trying to convince the hearts and minds, as they would say, as Robert McNamara said, right? That is everything. And seeing that volume, the volume of cases in which the same procedural misconduct was committed, and the reaction from the department wasn't to fire these dudes, wasn't to prosecute them, but was to bench them, keep it quiet until, other stuff happened, ergo the pandemic, and nobody would care anymore. I feel like as an attorney, that's just, as an activist and as an attorney, that's too good to pass up. But I digress. Ellis, 33, was walking home from a convenience store on March 3rd with a snack when Tacoma police said they saw him trying to get inside a car as it made a turn. Police said that Ellis charged at one officer, lifted him up, and violently threw him to the ground. But video of the incident filmed by two witnesses contradicted the police narrative. Now, mind you, the video is it's a moment. It's very short. We saw it. Sorry, listeners. It's a moment. It's still a condemning moment for the police officers because it was actually the opposite way around. Ellis was on the ground. This motherfucker just jumped on him and started wailing on him. But it doesn't show anything described about Ellis charging at an officer. None of that is shown. It just shows them beating up this guy. So Sarah McDowell and Samuel Cowden, both of whom drove by and filmed parts of the death, those are the two videos we saw, characterized the officers as aggressors, right? They said, and videos indicate, Ellis was placed in a chokehold and shocked with a taser. So they did hit the taser. I didn't see a taser. I don't know. I don't believe we saw a taser in the video. His head or neck was pinned under an officer's knee. We did see that. Neither eyewitness was interviewed during the sheriff's investigation, but the two later spoke to state patrol investigators. The Pierce County Medical Examiner's Office later determined that Ellis's cause of death was oxygen deprivation caused by restraint and ruled it a homicide. Tacoma Police Department spokesman Wendy Haddow said the department would not comment until it has reviewed the investigative records released Wednesday. Okay, so now we have it ruled as a homicide. What are you waiting on? And this happened already. He ruled it a homicide. I believe he was ruled a homicide some time ago. Let's see here. Contributing factors included, right, asphyxiation due to physical restraint. This was back in June. This article here, not the new one with the identification of the two new officers. So we have another CBS article. Tacoma mayor says officer involved in Manuel Ellis's death should be fired and prosecuted. Yeah, no shit. I mean, doesn't the buck stop with you? Don't you? I feel like I know at the very least you can fire the police commissioner. So you can exert political pressure on the commish to take action. I know the commish can do it. So I mean, right there, I feel like that's an avenue of action. But yeah, they ruled that this guy, keep doing that, Manuel Ellis, died due to hypoxia as a result of physical restraint. Ruled it a homicide back in June. Right then and there, the DA. For Washington, the Washington DA should have begun filing charges. Bing, bang, boom. Done deal. Especially, it's one thing when the Washington Examiner, we've seen cases like that where they, and that's why everybody was so upset. Like, oh, they're trying to say that his large heart killed him and all that. And he's saying, no, all of these factors contributed to him dying, but ultimately being choked out, having your airways restricted is what killed him. And that was happening due to the physical restraint. He was being thorough. I'll give him that. The medical examiner. He's just being real. But we have seen cases where they try and, oh my God, and there was a recent case where they ruled a shooting death a suicide. I believe we read about that on the show. I digress. But it is becoming. I mean, here's the thing. One has to ask: is it that it's being identified more now by mainstream media? Because as we've noted, They love the attention. It's about clicks. It's about attention. And this is something that should have attention on it, but definitely has been existing for decades and only now seems to be gaining light because it garners interest. But, I mean, this is what the moving the political needle does. So, the Overton window for this sort of thing, because initially it wasn't something mainstream media covered. But yeah, so we got movement on another incident that happened, one more recently, right? NYPD releases shocking video of woman tackling black teen over cell phone. So from what I've told, and I've never, this is new video, right? This just got released. From what I was told about this kid was just like chilling, and he was just minding his own business, and this woman just tackled him, thinking that he stole her cell phone. So again, listeners, unfortunately, you're gonna miss out on the visual, but they're in the lobby of a hotel, and she just she's talking to like some security guard, and his face is blocked out, and she's pointing at the black kid, at the black teen, at the black guy. Keon Harold, I guess he's the son of a prominent jazz musician. Oopsie. And yeah, you picked the you picked the wrong one. You picked the wrong one. Yeah, bro. See, that is the irony of the creator, right? There are plentiful we are around the planet and around this country, but right, the shit that gets notable, the shit that gets noted, the shit that media wants to cover, it either is like a mortally wounded person, like someone either is in the hospital about to die or someone died, right? Or it's someone famous. And those are the only times they seem to pay attention. We gotta die, or we gotta know somebody. And in this case, this guy is the son of a guy. So this kid is just like chilling. His face is blanked out too. She's talking to this cop. She points at him, right? And then she just takes off. And the kid just like he doesn't even run away. He just kind of walks a little bit away, and she tackles him. She full throttle charges at him, wraps her arms around him, spins him about several times, and throws him to the ground. And I mean, that's unreal. And what's furthermore, well, because there's also two security guards there, they don't really stop her until they hit the ground, and then presumably, because the video ends, presumably they pull it apart. But that woman is lucky they didn't just start wailing on, like, bang bang. But that's I definitely encourage people to defend themselves. But I digress. HuffPost reads, the NYPD released a dramatic surveillance video of a white woman. You got to make sure it's a white woman. It's a video, so we know it's a white woman. Of a white woman tackling a black teenager she accused of stealing her cell phone, which she had actually left behind in an Uber cab. You fucking stupid. Okay, you know what? The whole idea here is to not let your despondence, your how livid you are, your vexation, let that supersede your intellect. Don't let your emotion make you circumvent your ability to at least read an article. But it's like it's a situation where it's like you were existing while black. You were just a black dude in the vicinity, and that was just that was enough. That was fucking enough. And like I said, the black dude that in the vicinity, that happened to be in the vicinity, he knows a guy. So yo bad. But I mean, it probably would have made, because I mean, it made, before I found out about who he was, there was talks about it. I heard about it. So it's not really about him knowing somebody, but it's just the irony of it. It's like, yeah, you really fucked up now. Well, we'll see. The unidentified woman leaped at the 14-year-old boy. Oh, he's a kid. The son of popular jazz trumpeter Keon Harold, as she ordered him to turn over a cell phone. The attack occurred in the lobby of the Arlo Hotel in Manhattan's Soho neighborhood on Saturday. The woman fled the hotel before police arrived. Her phone was recovered that day by an Uber driver and returned, according to police. Harold, who played the trumpet in the Grammy Award-winning soundtrack to the 2015 Miles Davis biopic Miles Ahead, has also filmed part of the scene with his cell phone as he tried to protect his son. The woman can be heard ordering the teen to give his phone to her as Harold argues with her. Harold suffered scratches on the hand in the confrontation. I am furious, quote unquote. We see this crap happening all the time, but it hits different when it hits home. At least he's honest about it. It does hit different when it hits home. Harold earlier, is this video? Okay, I'm gonna mute it. This is about a minute long. So they're in their masks. Good for them, I guess. But she's just I remember seeing part of this. Yeah, she's in her yoga pants, and the video's kind of pointed downward, but she's just like pointing, presumably demanding the phone. She's kind of wide-eyed and kind of bug-eyed. But the kid's just standing there. Ooh, and then the holder of the phone is charged by her, and kind of she kind of presses the phone away. But they're just kind of going back and forth in the lobby. I've actually muted it, but for the most part, that's what this video is about. And then and I believe this is when the charging occurs. We for listeners, we've already seen that video. But yeah, she's on the ground, she's flailing about. Unbelievable. Police Chief Rodney Harrison released the hotel surveillance video on Wednesday as the department seeks the public's help for locating the attacker. The woman falsely accused a 14-year-old boy of stealing her cell phone, then proceeded to physically attack him and fled the location. Wow, they can't find this person. Oh, they'll find her because the up-close video is pretty high def. Somebody will notice her. Unbelievable. Let's read what Keon Harold said. I am furious. We see this crap happening all the time, but it hits different when it hits home. I typically try to keep things positive, but nothing about this video is positive. The lady in this video assaulted my 14-year-old son and me as we came down from our room in the Arlo Hotel to get breakfast. This person, quote-unquote, lost her iPhone, and apparently my son magically acquired it, which merely ridiculous. This incident went on for 5 more minutes, me protecting my son from this lunatic. She scratched me, she tackled and grabbed him. He is a child. Now watch it again. This lady is not even a guest at the hotel. Wow. She checked out of the hotel on the 23rd of December. Today is the 26th. Now watch as the manager advocates for the lady who is not even a hotel guest, insisting and attempting to use his managerial authority to force my son to show his phone to this random lady. He actually empowered her. Wow. He didn't even, this is like, she's not even staying at the hotel. You could have gone and looked to see when the last time she was there was and deduced, well, ma'am, you haven't even been here. Did he even ask her where the hell she'd been? Why was that his first, well, we know why that was his first reaction. I wonder if he knew who the dude was. And I say that because it's an identification of intent or an identification of perception. Right? Because, I firmly believe that a lot of the time these people will even overlook their own biases if you are high enough in the echelon. You feel me? He didn't even consider the fact that we were actually the guests. Now think about the trauma that my son now has to carry, only coming downstairs to have day brunch with his dad. Then her phone magically returned by an Uber driver a few minutes after the incident. No apology from her after this traumatic situation of my son, not me. No apologies from the establishment. This shit happens so often, it needs to stop. Wow, they didn't even get an apology. You didn't even get comped. Unbelievable. Police have identified the woman but have not released her name. A harassment complaint has been filed against her, but investigators are also considering assault and attempted robbery charges. The female individual has been positively identified, and detectives are endeavoring to locate her. The incident is not being investigated as a bias incident. Oh my God. See, here's the thing. All of these actions are taken to try and minimize the optics, the political and social optics of the situation, but they're already there. We're already looking at the situation through that lens. There's nothing you can do to minimize what is a racially charged incident. You can't just that's really the crux of it. Is it's already politicized to begin with, and now there's the eye is being pointed towards those types of scenarios already. We're looking for them. I think it's being reported more. I think we're looking for them more. And in the age of technology, the age of information and the Internet of Things, the combination of the two allows everyone with a cell phone to instantly upload your transgressions, your brutality, your illegality, your malfeasance. Like, it's all on display 24 hours a day. The same sort of surveillance technology that watches us, harasses us, and disenfranchises us is the same technology we use to report your transgressions and your illegalities. It's ironic. And, that's the best defense we have. Uh, but yes, Harold complained at a rally Wednesday that his son had been racially profiled by the woman. I can't even come downstairs in New York City and get brunch without getting attacked and wrongfully accused for something. I want my son to grow up whole. That's all we want. See, and there's that therein lies sort of the crux of, I don't want to say internal conflict, but where you have, an older, more probably more established generation of black folks, minorities, who who speak more constructively, who aim more constructively in the changes that they are suggesting, that they're positing, that they're desiring. And it's generally the younger generation that is of a more hot-headed variety. Like my friend who I was talking about yesterday, who they just kind of call out for outright violent revolution, and it's like that's not the way. And the revolution's happening. The change is happening. The shift, the aim towards what will be the established, zeitgeist for the next century is here. It's arrived, and we're establishing it as we speak. All right. Oh, that's not it. So yeah, um, we'll see. We'll see what the future holds for sure. We're moving into pandemic territory. I I don't know why I forgot that this was actually, it's a WHO vaccine course, an e-course that you can take, in which I was getting information about AEIFs, adverse effects from immunizations, and 1 in 1 million doses for listeners is measles. The oral polio vaccine, is 1 in 2 to 3 million doses for adverse reactions. And what we've seen, this came out just today, the FDA, according to Reuters, is investigating 5 allergic reactions after the Pfizer shot. Okay, so we know of with Pfizer, and I believe I've talked about, I think with this 5, it will be 10 different instances that I've talked about, perhaps 9, but this is 5 in one shot. This happened this week, just this week alone. So we are definitely seeing record numbers of AEIFs, AFIs. We'll call them. We got to call them AFIs or something. We got to shorten that up. Yeah, AFIs. So we're seeing a record number of AFIs. You can't take me seriously with me saying AFIs. We're seeing a record number of adverse reactions to this vaccination campaign, the likes of which I don't think has happened before. But again, I'm not a virologist, not an epidemiologist, I'm not even a historian. I am just an interested party with an opinion to share and a concern that I think is well warranted. With Moderna, we've seen far less. I actually had a Quora gentleman who had kind of gathered up some real quick stats on the different types of adverse reactions in different states that have been occurring. Moderna has far fewer, but still I think is in the 9 or 10 territory. Pfizer I think is in the 20 territory, because this makes 10, and he was counting between multiple days there had been 17. So there have been a lot. There's been a lot. Let's read. The FDA is investigating around 5 reactions that happened after people were administered the Pfizer shot in the U.S. this week, a top FDA official said. Dr. Peter Marks, director of the FDA's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, said at a press conference that the allergic reactions had been reported in more than one state, including Alaska. Marks also said that a chemical called polyethylene glycol, that is an ingredient in the Pfizer vaccine, PEG, as well as the Moderna vaccine authorized on Friday, could be the culprit. Marks said that allergic reactions to PEG could be somewhat more common than previously understood. The cases in Alaska were similar to 2 cases reported last week in Britain. Britain's medical regulator has said that anyone with a history of anaphylaxis or severe allergic reactions to medicine or food should not be given the Pfizer shot. But if the stuff in the Pfizer shot, the PEG, polyethylene glycol, if that's in both of them, why would you? This is what I mean. This is what happens when private industry, it becomes the crux by which we function as a society, and whether a government functions as a regulatory institution. Oh my God. So the FDA said that most Americans with allergies should be safe to receive the vaccine, except for the millions of people per year who've gotten facial fillers. They can't take the Moderna vaccine. And I mean, Pfizer vaccine has had nearly twice as many anaphylactic reactions, so I wouldn't take either of them. I used to have faith in the Moderna vaccine. You know, Dr. Fauci was the only person of note that has taken it up until now. I believe there was another official that has taken it since then. But they're the only ones that taken it, and there hadn't been any really reactions that I had seen. But then I did a little more digging, and yeah. It is said only people who have previously had severe allergic reactions to vaccines or ingredients in this particular vaccine should avoid getting the shot. But we know that's not the case because the majority of the Pfizer cases that we had been reading about on this very show were from people who didn't have a history of allergic reactions. This is what I mean about skewed information, you know, a manufactured narrative. I want to go so far as to say outright lie, but oops, sorry. Right. So, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. I get all excited, start waving my hands, things get whacked. Anyway, the reality of the matter is that the Moderna vaccine says and I remember the point I was trying to make. I don't want to go so far as to say they outright are lying, but it wouldn't be the first time. The FDA said the Moderna vaccine should not be given to individuals with a known history of severe allergic reactions to any components of the shot. Well, it'd be nice if you would release the components of the shot, but I mean, it's easy enough to Google. But the reality of the matter is this is counter. This is a 180 from everything that we had been told initially, and incrementally they've changed this. This is very similar to Dr. Fauci. What it is, guys, is that science is not a sure thing, and it takes time, really. That's the whole point. Time and research. Time that was not given to this research, that was not really divulged, right, to us until the very last minute. To finish off, the regulator is also requiring that appropriate medical treatments for immediate allergic reactions must be available when the shot is administered in case of a reaction. There you go. See, that is a critical component to the vaccine administration process that was not there because the information was not there to tell us that could be the case. And what's fascinating to me is that you did not hear anything about these AEFI rates with any of the data that was given to us by the Moderna vaccine or the Pfizer vaccine trial data. So, but NIH devising study on rare allergic reaction to coronavirus vaccine, Washington Post. Officials at the NIH are rushing to devise a study to find out why in a few rare cases, people have suffered allergic reaction to the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine. The goal is to identify the component of the vaccine most likely to be responsible for these potentially life-threatening incidents known as anaphylaxis. No cases have yet been associated with the other newly authorized vaccine made by Moderna. We've read on this very show that that's not the case. This Reuters article, this was on December 21st in their defense, but this Reuters article flies in the face of that. And there were multiple instances of AEIF's anaphylaxis from Moderna well before December 21st. This is also for posterity. This is also part of the reason why I do this, because there's literally, I mean, I'm going to do it. We're going to do it. There's literally lies being manufactured before our very eyes. That is a lie. No cases have yet been associated with other newly authorized vaccine made by Moderna. When we read that you can't, if you get facial fillers, you can't get the Moderna vaccine because of what happened to that woman. I mean, and millions of people, I see this every day. Millions of people get facial fillers every year. It's gross, but that's reality. And so this is an outright fallacy, and yet WAPO will continue. Washington Post, I believe that was the Woodward and Bernstein paper of repute. Not anymore. At this point, I don't feel like reading this anymore because this is just garbage. But the NIH is conducting. Everyone now is interested. The FDA is interested. The NIH is interested in anaphylactic reactions from the vaccines. You'd think that it would work the other way around, where they would, investigate the possibility of anaphylaxis before it starts occurring to people around the country and the world too. But I digress. All primary schools in London remain closed after U-turn. So regarding the pandemic, because we got this regarding the pandemic, and then afterward we'll close out with a little bit of domestic news and just really the class war always escalating, always becoming more overt, more physical. Somebody now has, they vandalized Nancy Pelosi's house, probably because of the fucking stimulus, probably because at the end of the day, both Democrats and Republicans played games with our money and with our lives, but they vandalized it with a pig's head and fake blood. Let me one thing at a time, right? One thing at a time. Oh, as always, please like, share, and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. I always, just try and thread the needle, right? And just kind of weave a picture of what is happening. And as we go through the year, it's going to be here for a long time to come. It will be interesting to see how all of this coalesces, how the picture that ends up being created before us. Because we're seeing patterns emerge, right? Every day I do this, and every day we seem to be talking about the same sort of few things, both by choice, but out of pattern recognition, out of trying to make sure that we establish what's happening and what continues to happen with particular instances and events that crop up, all of the same, and pointing all to a particular narrative. That's really what I've always thought news was supposed to be. What as a journalist I would want to do is like grab a story that is impactful, make sense of it, and then follow through. But The Guardian reads, all primary schools in London are to remain closed for the start of the new term after the government bowed to protests and legal pressure from the capital's local authorities. Under the government's initial plan, secondary schools and colleges were set to be closed to most pupils for the first 2 weeks of January, while primary schools within 50 local authorities in London and south of England were also told to keep their doors shut until January 18th. Okay. But the list omitted several London areas where COVID-19 transmission rates remain high, including the borough of Haringey, whose leaders said they were prepared to defy the government and support any schools that decided to close to protect staff and pupils. So why would they not close these schools? This is an interesting story. The protests from local authority leaders came to a head with a letter to the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, from 9 London authorities asking for their primary schools to be closed to all except vulnerable children and those whose parents or key workers. The action provoked an emergency cabinet office meeting on New Year's Day, which signed off on the revision, adding the remaining 10 London education authorities to government's contingency areas. So they asked to be closed down. Dr. Mary Boosted, Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union, said primaries across the country should close. What is right for London is right for the rest of the country. It is time for the government to protect its citizens, and in particular its children, by shutting all primary schools for 2 weeks in order for the situation to be properly assessed, schools made much safer, and children and their families protected. So in England, they want the shutdown. All right. That's what I mean. If that's the will, if that's the political will there, fine. In Capital, Richard Wass, the leader of Islington, said, I'm very relieved to hear this news. There was enormous concern from parents and schools who couldn't understand the rationale for why some boroughs were excluded. We welcome that the government has belatedly listened to local areas. We will be working with our schools to ensure that they offer high-quality online learning and can welcome pupils back as soon as public health deem it to be sensible. I mean, it is very questionable why, if you're worried about COVID transmission, even though I've always advocated looking towards not necessarily positive infection rate, but to ICU admission rate and death rate. They all need to correlate with each other. Because people just getting it isn't enough. If they get it and they're all asymptomatic, then you shouldn't act as if it's got a 50% mortality rate. As we've seen, 80 million people have been infected globally. 1.6 have died. That's a little over 2%. It's like 82 million and 1.82 million or so. It's like 81, 82 million. 1.6 million or so dead. That's a little over 2% death rate. That amounts to what the flu death rate used to be. But remember, as I continue to remind you of all these things, there is no flu statistic as far as we've seen. It is now the PIC statistic, the pneumonia, influenza, and COVID stat. So we will see as we continue, because we've seen in Japan. Japan used to be hailed for having low infection numbers, but that's not the case, one. And two, they were hailed for having this be the case because of their mask mandate. But the mask mandate hasn't worked, just like the mask mandate hasn't worked elsewhere. The argument used to be that, oh, well, people aren't doing it. It's those gosh darn Trump supporters who are not wearing. And notice how I put on the country accent for like liberals, because it doesn't matter. I've seen like Kentucky Fried liberals, and I've seen really loose acting conservatives, really like fiscal conservatives, but socially liberal. That's pretty much where I stand. I'd call those progressives, and it's like not even really fiscal conservatism per se, because that's not very progressive. But don't even get me started. But the reality is, we come in all shapes and sizes, and the reality is that people try to associate good policy, always trying to politicize good policy. And that's what we always say: don't follow a person, don't follow a political party, don't follow a politician, follow a principle, follow a policy. The 5 P's. But we will see this develop. I mean, England has always been, since 9/11, has always been a place that is called for and ratified for more oversight, more micromanagement on the part of the government. I'm not sure of the UK's particular stats and numbers. We do know that they have a more transmissible strain currently out. That's where that started. It's now in South Africa and Nigeria. It's not the UK strain in South Africa. Always keep that in mind. The South African strain and the UK strain are mutated differently. It didn't jump from the UK to South Africa. That's always fun. America, it's out in America. It was in Colorado and California. They do believe it jumped here via travel. It's also in Nigeria. But we're going to move away from pandemic. Well, a little bit. The $600 stimulus check is too small for 72% of Trump voters. So I found this poll interesting. It's a Business Insider poll. In April 2020, a coronavirus stimulus of $1,200 was sent. 8 months later, Republicans, Democrats, and Congress agreed on a $900 billion plan that sent half as much. President Trump announced on Tuesday they should be much more, 2,000. According to a poll, just a third of Trump voting respondents agreed and said the check should be 2,000 or more. That doesn't read right. According to insider polling, just a third of Trump voting respondents agreed. But this says 72%. No, more than 2/3. What is happening with journalism? That is absurd. And for any two-bit who only reads the sub tags, or not sub tags, but the sub headline, I guess we'll call it, right? They'll see the article like, oh wow, 600, like 72%, 2/3 of Trump voters actually agree that a $600 check is too small, and then reads this and it says only a third agree with him. After Republicans and Democrats in Congress approved of a $900 billion coronavirus stimulus bill on Sunday that includes a $600 check, Trump said that the check should be larger, $2,000. His supporters agree. Recent polling showed that 72% of respondents who voted for Trump believe that the stimulus check should be greater than $600, which means that a good majority of his supporters aren't necessarily deficit hawks. They're not for austerity, or at least at a time of crisis, right? And I guarantee you a good portion of those who support, well, here we go. And here's the question. Do those who support Trump generally support McConnell, and vice versa? And if so, would McConnell supporters really support him, stymieing, giving them more money? But conversely, 1 in 10 Trump voting respondents said the stimulus check should be zero, or effectively no stimulus check at all. 1 in 10 is trash. Out of 10 people, if one person says no and 9 don't, all right. Well, you got to express everything in its full and total. I get it. Recent polls from Insider and SurveyMonkey, we'll read that one more time, showed that 72% of respondents who voted for Trump believe that the stimulus check should be greater than $600. Conversely, 1 in 10 Trump voting respondents said the stimulus check should be zero, or effectively none at all. So at the very least, we have progressives aligning with conservatives, Trump conservative. That's why articles make that differentiation between like conservatives and Trump supporters. Further breakdown of responses from Trump voters are as follows. A third, or 33%, agree with Trump and said the stimulus check should amount to 2,000 or more. 70% said the stimulus check should be 1,000 or greater. Only 20 said the stimulus check should be less than 600, and 10 said they should be 5% or more. The poll was taken on the 21st, and it was collected over, from like 1,123 respondents. So, you're starting to see what that says to me at the very least is that your progressive policies are starting to become widely accepted, right? If the 2020 election was not a referendum on austerity and public conservatism, I don't know what was. Like, people, well, here's the thing, cancel culture is a form of conservatism in and of itself. But that's a different topic altogether. As far as economic policy and domestic drug policy, full on progressive initiatives, people want, prison and bail reform. People want Medicare for all. People want a $15 minimum federally, which pretty much got that. That's done. People want they want they want a more, what's the word I'm looking for? A more tactile change seen in their lives. And unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen with a president that continually says that he wants to go back to business as usual. If only one wonders if you take the policy of one guy and the personality of another guy, but you can't do that. You don't get that in life. So what you do end up having is people unable to separate the policy of one person from the personality of another. And man, if only someone had taken away that fucking retard's Twitter account. I'm sorry. Can we not say retard? If someone had just restrained this guy from fucking opening his mouth, but that's what egomaniacism is. That's what happens when you're a narcissist. Trump handed defeat as Congress overrides defense bill veto. The NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, was passed with a veto-proof majority. So then it was vetoed by Trump. It's a process. It was passed by a veto-proof majority, vetoed by Trump. What happens is, from what I can tell, the veto-proof majority opens the ability for them to veto Trump's veto. So they create this opportunity to veto Trump's veto. Trump vetoes it, expressing there's language in there to change the names of bases and things like that are named after Confederate soldiers and generals. There's language in there that's there's no language to repeal 230 of the Communications Decency Act. That was another complaint of his. And so McConnell took that complaint for 230, took the election fraud committee request, and tied that to the $2,000 House bill. That's why it was stopped. And so now the veto-proof majority has succeeded and Trump's veto has been vetoed. Whatever. Trump's override has been overridden. Trump's veto has been vetoed. Congress handed Donald Trump a major bipartisan defeat in the waning days of his presidency as the Republican-led Senate voted to override his veto of a $740 billion defense policy bill. It's the first time one of Trump's vetoes has been surmounted. On Twitter, always fucking Twitter. Always Twitter. On Twitter, he said something stupid. The final tally is 81-13, easily exceeding the 2/3 needed to override the veto, with support coming from both Republicans and Democrats as it did earlier in the House. The massive annual defense authorization measure will now become law. Trump had sought to intimidate GOP senators into voting to sustain his veto, unleashing a bitter attack on fellow Republicans as the chamber prepared to begin the override process. Weak and tired Republican leadership will allow the bad defense bill to pass, Trump tweeted on the 29th. Negotiate a better bill or get better leaders. Now, he added on Saturday, Trump attacked Senator John Thune for a second time, suggesting that Governor Kristen Noem run against the senator's number 2 Republican in a 2022 South Dakota primary. Before the final vote, Senator Jack Reed, Democrat of Rhode Island, urged all of our colleagues to override Trump's veto. Senate Armed Services Chairman Jim Inhofe, Republican of Oklahoma and typically a Trump ally, called the annual defense bill the most significant vote we have and praised the bipartisan spirit that went into it. There's not really anything on the bill, not an option. Not once in 6 decades has a Congress let its differences prevent it from completing the work for an. McConnell is always, that's McConnell's thing. Posterity. We have to maintain what already has been. And Mitch has made $3,000 this week while blocking the $2,000 stimulus check. So it's always Mitch wanting to keep things as usual business running along as things have been, with people not being represented appropriately, accordingly, with people not being able to have a sustainable lifestyle, really, to struggle to make ends meet. You know, we went through this yesterday. 30 to 60 million people die per year from not having health and healthcare. 14 million people lost their healthcare this year due to the pandemic, and we're facing a situation where we may have to copay for the vaccine as a public. All right, and even if that's not the case, we were just reading yesterday about drug companies announcing that they're going to be hiking up their drug prices. One of those companies being Pfizer, who's now given us this I don't know, bunked vaccine that's causing anaphylactic reactions all across the country. But let's read this real quick. Newsweek reads, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was paid $3,300 this week while he blocked a one-time stimulus for $2,000. Even before the pandemic, 40% of Americans were struggling to afford at least one basic necessity, and 78% of full-time workers were living paycheck to paycheck, according to figures from 2017. 500,000 people were counted as homeless in 2018 alone. Of course, the pandemic has made things worse, right? We have 800,000 or so people filing for unemployment every day. In the spring, 22 million jobs were lost, which could take as long as 4 years to recover without any relief. As of June, roughly 14 million workers and their dependents had lost health insurance, right? The number of Americans affected by food insecurity has hit 54 million, up 35 million pre-pandemic, and more than 14 million American households are at risk of eviction, and more than 336,000 Americans have died from the virus. Right. And so, good old Mitch, and so what ends up happening is you're seeing, and because, things as usual, is that lack of representation, that lack of acknowledgement, that lack of attention to what the needs are of the American people. It's led us to this warfare, this class warfare, this sort of loggerhead in which now everything is becoming overt. And the problem is with overt action comes overt reaction. So Nancy Pelosi's home has been vandalized with pig's head and fake blood over the stimulus. Yeah, people who know that she played games before the election in order to solidify Trump's loss are they've had it. They've had it. And then no less arguing for a lesser stimulus, right? In the face of people like Bernie Sanders and Senator Hawley asking for 2,000, arguing for a lesser stimulus because Biden basically was the turning point. He came in and argued, against the idea of having a $2,000 stimulus, let alone a $1,200 stimulus. But we'll finish up with this. Somebody left Nancy Pelosi a very disturbing message to kick off the new year, and it seems to be related to the financial struggles of millions of Americans. Pelosi's San Francisco home was vandalized overnight, just her San Fran home. Most of the damage was done to her garage door and driveway. The perp sprayed "cancel rent and we want everything" in big black letters on her door, and there's also a nod to the failed $2,000 government stimulus checks. It's just some bread. Yeah, there's a. I'm not sure if it's a real pig's head, but there's what looks like a pig's head and fake blood in front of her garage door. It's a good old fashioned regular garage door, brick outlay. And it says black spray paint, "cancel rent, we want everything." It's got the anarchy symbol on it. It's got some dollar signs on it. Even more unnerving is what looks like a pig's head and fake blood were also staged in front of her garage. Law enforcement said that cops responded to a vandalism call at her home around 3 a.m. We're told a police report was taken, but it's unclear if they have any suspects. And then, of course, they go into the $2,000 deal, and it's like, well, what do you expect? We are reaching that breaking point, that precipice we talk about every day. Is we are edging closer and closer to it, and instead of looking to soar, we look into the pits and despair upon the works. Yeah. I'm thinking about that Osmandius quote, and I can't recall off the top of my head. It's like, "Gaze upon my works in despair. I am Osmandius, gaze upon my works in despair." Or, and it's just, it to me, it is the worst kind of manifestation that we can have. Civil movements, civil liberty movements, civil-minded movements, progressive movements are most effective in their ability to mobilize, to affect the system, to garner attention. But when it becomes volatile and physical, it gets ugly fast. And, we want to avoid that here and along the Watchtower for sure. With that said, please like, share, and subscribe. I hope everything is well. I hope you had a great new year. Be well to yourself and to each other. Take care.